Good afternoon and welcome to the Osterville Village Library. My name is Amy Wolf. I'm the programming director here at the OVL. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And to our friends joining us on Zoom, thank you for being here as well. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Gary Bowden from, did I say that right?
You did,
okay.
correct. Thank
From
you.
the Master Gardeners, here to talk about pollinator pathways. Gary is a certified Master Gardener. As a member of the Master Gardeners of Cape Cod, he serves as Vice President. He was a founding member of the Pollinator Pathway Cape Cod, a collaborative of Cape Cod nonprofits and businesses supporting native plants and pollinator protection. He's a frequent lecturer on the benefits of native plants and Cape landscapes. Gary is also a trustee with the Orleans Conservation Trust and is on, Simpson Islands Trust's Land Management Committee.
There you go.
Woo!
That's a lot.
So without further ado, Gary Bowden.
Thanks, Amy. Everybody, happy Friday. A little rain. We had a little rain in Orleans. I don't know if you guys did it. Yeah, it was unfortunately a little too little, but we'll see how we're doing here. Well, I'm glad to see everybody here and hope those who are watching from Zoom enjoy this as well. I've got about a 40-minute or so talk, talking a bit about creating a habitat-friendly Cape Cod landscape. And throughout it, I'll talk a bit about the Pollinator Pathway Cape Cod and why it's important and what we're doing. And I just had a tour of a few sites here in Osterville before I got here. So it's impressive to see what's happening in right here in downtown Osterville. So as you heard, I'm a Master Gardener. Came to the Cape permanently in 2019. We live in Orleans, have about an acre property that's a lot of garden beds and is increasingly more and more native beds. I still have a lot of hydrangeas, but I also have a lot of oak trees and pines and native shrubs and rhodies and various things that are all contributing to what we're talking about today. So I've enjoyed gardening. I've been on the hydrangea tour once and on the Orleans garden tour once, and hopefully we'll manage to do that again. So let me get to today. What we're going to talk about is what's habitat-friendly gardening, why is it important, how do you bring pollinators to your yard, how do I go native, which the whole conversation you hear a lot about is adding native plants. So we'll talk about what does it mean to go native. What are essentials and what can you do, which is really the conversation that I want to share and give you some hope. I kind of start with some downer news to start with about why this is important. But in the end, I want to assure everybody watching this and listening that there is hope and there's a lot of things that you can do. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let me just kind of find out why you chose today to come. Are you gardeners? How many of you are actively gardeners in your yard doing? Okay. And how many of you, any of you on the Pollinator Pathway already or know about it? All right, I got a good fan here. Hopefully by the end of it, I'll convince you to sign up yourself if you haven't and join us on this vision we're on of improving the Cape. So what's habitat-friendly gardening? Really, what I'm going to give you some facts about this, but a few facts about the science and why we're concerned about habitat-friendly gardening. Explaining to people really why I call it nature-based gardening is possible anywhere. It can be done on a patio, it can be done on a deck, it can be done in a 10-acre property or a small urban lot. We're going to talk about choosing climate-friendly native plants. A lot of this movement began on the Cape. The summer of 21-22, we had a terrible drought that year. And a lot of questions are coming to the Master Gardeners about planting drought-tolerant plants and what would work because we just were not getting the water. And now we're almost in another one of those situations this year. But also we're worried on the Cape about pesticides and herbicides and chemicals in our lawns and ultimately in our water. And this is a very appropriate way to garden and being recognizing all of that risk. And I'd love to say that being a native plant fan and adding them into your garden is really also sort of being a lazy gardener, because in a way they are not requiring the maintenance that roses and many other things require. So we'll talk about a little bit about all that and really tell you how you can support a pollinator habitat in your home gardens. So here's a bit of the science and a bit of the bad news. The articles written about this really, I think, you can go back 20, 30 years and find stories about problems with insects. But for my personal story, it really came about in the New York Times article, The Insect Apocalypse is Here. And it really talked about the extreme loss in recent decades of the viable insects, and not just in the US. This article was really largely based on a lot of science that was in Europe, but it clearly was also happening here. But it's as recent as a March study this year that talked about butterfly decline, where they really studied specifically butterflies being aware of this insect decline since 2000. They were studying what's happened. And the butterfly reduction just in 20 years, based on types of butterflies and volume of butterflies, this study goes into great detail about that loss. But a lot of us heard about monarchs and the monarch loss, and that was really what attracted a lot of people to this, was worrying about the monarchs, and were they returning to Mexico? Were they returning to their sites both on the West Coast and the East Coast year after year? And we've seen huge drops in monarchs, and it's gotten to the point where people are monitoring and counting the monarchs every season and giving us either good or bad news about how they're doing. Xerces Society, if you're not familiar, Xerces is a national society based out of Minnesota. They've done tremendous research on habitat and insect loss, and they've done a lot of study about bumblebees and bumblebee decline. Here in Massachusetts, we have in Dartmouth, UMass Dartmouth, we have a professor, Dr. Robert Gagir, whose specialty is focusing on native bees of Massachusetts, and I'll tell you a little bit about him and what he's been doing. So my point is, the problem is real. It's documented over and over again. This Oliver Millman book is the most recent book I'd read. He's British, but he's living in America, and the book both talks about Great Britain and the US. And I love the title, The Fall of the Tiny Empires That Run the World. And without them, it's all this habitat creating world that we live in, and we'll talk more about. So why the decline? Well, it's all of these things. The decline are, what do we think this represents? What's this over here? This little community of green lawns and homes and right up against the pond. This is just expansion. This is what's happened. And this, I think, particularly shows what's going on in the Cape in a lot of ways. You know, that is not a lot of habitat. That is awfully bright green lawn. That is sporadic trees, probably not native, right up against the pond, no buffer zone anywhere. That is not creating habitat. And that is actually removing habitat and not providing a home for the insects we care about. The bottom photo, of course, talks about farming, agriculture, our farming culture in the last 50 years has changed to largely be, particularly in the Midwest and the West and California, parts of Florida. It's not the home farmers. It's not the small 10-acre, 5-acre plots that existed early in the 20th century. It's big commercial farms, and there's no hedgerows. They're applying chemicals to increase their production. Neonicotinoids, which we'll mention briefly in a minute, are being used to coating seeds, and therefore it comes up systemically through the flowers and the plants. Nothing is really helping sustain insects in our farming culture that we have today. And then, of course, the top photo is just really showing spraying and what's happened. And I, as a master gardener, part of this is my personal push is to really get people to think about what they're doing with the insect sprays and the mosquito scot sprays and the tick sprays. I have a strong personal opinion about it. What I encourage people to do is really do research. Don't just research with the vendor you're talking to, because of course they want to sell you something. So do your own research and find out what happens. It is not a selective pesticide. It is not a selective, it is achieving what you want, which is killing the mosquitoes it comes in contact with. But the long-term effect of it is certainly debatable and still under study. And we know really the way to kill mosquitoes is to get their larval host sites, not to spray. And this spray has certainly contributed to the insect loss that we're experiencing. So we're going to talk about, why does it matter? And it matters because of these guys. Who knows what this is? This little guy over here, the caterpillar with the green leaf. It's a monarch caterpillar, right? And eating probably on a milkweed, I would believe. And that really, as I mentioned, has been the focal point of so many people's interest, is protecting the monarchs. And if it takes one poster child to protect a whole species and classes of species, it's a start. But this guy down here, this blue butterfly, is an example of a blue Carner butterfly, practically extinct in New England. What does it live on? What does it need to replicate? It needs this lupin that's right here. You might think, well, there's lots of lupins. I was just up in Maine. There's tons of lupins. I see lupins. What has happened is the lupin here, well, this lupin is the correct lupin, but this is the sundial lupin. But the lupin that we see now in Maine, and we can unfortunately buy in most of our garden centers, is the western lupin, which is not a host for this guy, for this butterfly. And it's basically outcompeted, cross-pollinated with, caused extinction in a lot of manners, the sundial lupin, which is really what has created a relationship and had allowed the blue Carner to survive, and is now seeing the demise of the blue Carner because of that. Of course, the monarch you've heard about lives on milkweed, needs to leave its eggs on milkweeds, its larva when the larva is released, must be nourished on the common milkweed, and without the common milkweed, that relationship doesn't exist. So we're talking a lot about critical relationships and why it matters. And there really is, and I'll give you a few quotes in a minute, but there really is this natural, since the beginning of time, relationship between plants and habitat. In other words, if we need a habitat, we need plants to support the habitat. If we need insects, and insects are to thrive as that butterfly, it needs certain plants. And really here on the Cape, we particularly see, but it's true everywhere, the reduction of birds, because birds also rely on those insects. Without caterpillars to feed their young, the birds don't have a food source. And the change in bird population, particularly on the Cape, but all through the eastern US and migratory birds, one of the sources can be tracked back to a loss of habitat and a loss of food. Birds need certain plants because those plants are there to provide the insects to help the birds. So it's a complicated but yet very clear interrelationship, and that is why it matters. There's a few quotes I'll give you, which is one just about this rich state of equilibrium, and I mentioned the history of talking about this. And E.O. Wilson, who was a Harvard professor, born in 29, studied ants of all things, was his specialty. But I thought this quote was so nice and so really tied it up. If mankind were to disappear, the world would regenerate back to a rich state of equilibrium that existed 10,000 years ago. But if insects disappeared, we would lose so much. Environment would collapse into chaos. We need those insects for so many things that we live with and enjoy today. And even John Muir, a writer, one of the earliest environmentalists in the US, we try to pick out anything by itself where it's hitched to everything else in the universe. And it's really part of this mantra of trying to get people to understand the choices they make in their personal lawn care and their actions out in the garden in the world. So I mentioned that pollinators need native plants. Here's a great example again of the monarch. This is in our yard, munching away on the butterfly weed, which is a form of Asclepias, a form of milkweed. And this was just last summer. And fortunately, this summer, I've seen them back again. The monarchs seem to be, I don't know if you've seen them, Jack. I feel like they're around, maybe even in better numbers, or maybe I'm just paying attention to them. But this relationship exists, that there are specialist insects who require particular plants. And a lot of it are what we now consider weeds, the clovers, the alfalfa, mallow, milkweed, vetch, things that those commercial farms I showed you have gotten rid of because they impede their growth of plant material. But also we just as gardeners have historically not thought those looked attractive, that they weren't something we cherished in our gardens. But it's those particular plants that are home to and necessary habitat for certain butterflies. The wild indigo dusty-winged skipper eats leaves that are of the wild indigo plant. And you don't see that as commonly. And the wild lupin that I mentioned. Filiary butterflies, which are fairly common, but they primarily need violets. And yet violets is something that a lot of us removed out of our lawns because that purple flower was unattractive. Please let the violets grow in your lawns if you have them. And the swallowtail, the eastern swallowtail, the beautiful, probably just as beautiful as the monarch, needs a lot of our native trees. And when you think about that community I showed you earlier, you didn't see many trees in that community. I mean, here on the Cape, we do have a decent selection of trees, and particularly native trees. But that swallowtail needs birches and willows, and those may not be as common as other things we have. So, native plants, as I said, attract pollinators. Just some great photos here. On the far right is the Stokes aster with a frilliary butterfly on it. The monarch, of course, posed perfectly there on the milkweed, ice ballet. And then we've got some anise hyssop on the far side with the beautiful big old bumblebee gathering a little nectar as it goes along. So by planting these things, you will attract the pollinators. And there are certainly choices you can make in flower in gardening that does not attract them. And I'm the biggest fan of hydrangeas you'll find. I love hydrangeas, but the fact of the matter is the mophead hydrangea has zero value for insects. The lace caps, some of the native arborescens, and we'll talk about do, but the beautiful hydrangea that we all love is not really helping the pollinators. So please support it by bringing these other things into this other plant material into your garden. So just a quick number, and it's on your slide, is about the top native plants for generalist butterflies. So what can you do? Somebody asked me, what can I do to help the most butterflies or the most insects? Lupin has a short season. I'm not gonna be able to grow that in my yard. These are very common natives that will be have been identified as being very among the top attractors of pollinators. Black-eyed Susan, a lot of us can see. Yes, the bunnies do like it to a degree, but you plant enough of it, you'll feed the bunnies and the insects. Joe Pye weed, which it's a tall plant, it's a little large for some gardens. New England aster, just now getting ready to pop, can be tall, but can also be pinched back and kept in control. I mentioned the butterfly weed. Coreopsis is a yellow flower that the bunnies don't seem to like. It comes in different varieties. Liatris, which is gay feather, commonly called gay feather, tall, pokey plant, and the purple coneflower. And what you note about these is if you pay attention to when these bloom, is a lot of these are coming about at different times. Butterfly weed's a little early. The New England aster is certainly late. Joe Pye is about now till later. Black-eyed Susans have been out for a while. Coreopsis can be very early in the season. So you wonder, those butterflies start arriving early in the season, and certainly our bees are out even earlier. So providing food for them throughout seasons is very important. Couple quick facts about bees. This is always interesting when I talk to people, is we're trying to protect our native bees. And our native bees, there are roughly about 4,000 native bees, species of native bees in the US. In the state of Massachusetts, there's about 400 commonly accepted. But of those, I mean, that ranges from the tiniest of bees to the large bumblebees and carpenter bees. But we really are seeing about a dozen, 20, 30, some years ago. Now we're down to about a dozen common bumblebees that you'll see. And why is that? It's because they've lost habitat. They lost their ability to reproduce. But a lot of what's gotten people started in this concern about pollinators has been the honeybee. And the honeybee is the European honeybee. That's its name. It is not a native bee, but we've gone through a lot of effort being concerned about hive collapse and the loss of the production of honey due to collapse of honeybees. But the fact is, our honeybees are a huge producer in terms of pollination for our plant industry and our food, but the bumblebees provide similar benefits, and really to a lot of the common fruit that we have in our summer, be it strawberries or squash, blueberries. Those all have specialist native bees that attend to them. And if we don't have them, we don't have those plants. We don't have those fruits. But the honeybees, while we were worried about them with hive collapse, the fact of the matter is they are effectively reproducible. You can get a new queen, you can start a new hive, you can reproduce what they do. We can ship honeybees around the country. There are hives of honeybees that move and live on semi-trailers and move farm to farm, particularly in California, supporting almond trees or whatever fruit production is appropriate at that time. We can't move our native bees around. Our native bees don't travel very far. So our native bees need to be helped by us, by man, by producing things that will help them. So furthermore, just more reason to think about why this is important that we keep supporting them. So I mentioned the top native bees in Massachusetts. 425 of them or so are common. Bombus, the big bumblebee. I think it's fascinating if you just spend some time in your garden and look at the variety of bees that are coming to the plants that you have. You'll see the little green bees. You'll see the various varieties of bumblebees with different wing shape, different fuzziness degree, different striping on them. You'll see the carpenter bees with their sort of shiny rear end as opposed to the fuzzy rear ends. But 80% of our native bees are ground nesting. So they're, I think, explain to your kids and talk to people. They don't live in hives. Only the honeybee lives in a hive in the box that we see out in some people's farms. That's only the honeybee that lives there. There's a queen. They're protecting that queen. They're producing the honey through the hives that are stacked in those boxes. But our native bees are soloist. There are some of them that are social, that will nest together to a degree, but most of them are ground nesters. Other of them live in old wood, they live in stems, they live in open hollowed branches from last year, but a great deal of their production is in the ground through tubes, either created previously by insects or to a degree by themselves. Wasps are similarly, if you watch a big golden digger wasp, you'll see what they manage to dig through in order to lay their eggs. And it's amazing, their productivity and how fast they can operate. But then she goes down, the queen goes down and the female goes down and lays eggs in those tubes that they've created. But you think about why that's important. When we talk about habitat, is if those bees can't get to the ground, they can't possibly lay those eggs. So if you've got 4 inches of mulch, because that's what the garden industry has convinced us we need, 3 or 4 inches of mulch to protect our grounds from weed, the bees aren't coming down through 3 or 4 inches of mulch. They're just not attracted to that ground material. It's too dense for them to get through. And then if you put that mulch down in February or March before they've come out of the ground because you had some bare ground, they aren't going to be able to get through all that. So think about why and how you are covering your ground in your garden beds. But pollen, I mentioned, is needed from spring to fall. The bees have short lives. They can live up to it. Their existence can take up to a year in terms of egg to larva to release to life. But the fact of the matter is most of our bees live a matter of a month or two. Actually, that we see them flying is about a month or two. Some butterflies, it's a matter of weeks that we see them. So if we don't have food for them when they are out, they're not going to thrive and survive. So pollen's needed spring to fall. And I mentioned these, I don't need to read all these, but you'll see it's a lot of the common ones we've talked about. But the irises are very early. The yellow wild indigo, baptisia is in May. Bee balm is out now. Milkweed's out now. Goldenrod will be coming very soon, and the asters towards the fall. The bees will, a good frost will end the bee's life, but they start around May and they end in our fall. Our fall time frame. So they're in decline. I mentioned Dr. Gagir from UMass. He's been studying. The proof is incontrovertible that we've got an insect loss, and he's done a lot and given a lot of talks about why it's important to continue them. So I put on the handout, easy to find plants that will support our native bees. Again, and people think of milkweed just being the common milkweed that you see out in the fields. But there are a number of varieties of milkweeds that are very attractive and provide interest in a garden. St. John's wort, there's a native version, and there's also some varieties that have been produced and some that are not native, but the flower is so long living and attractive. It's a small shrub. It's a great addition to your garden. Willows are tough to have in a lot of gardens, but in our wild areas, willows are great, huge supporter of bees. In the Monarda, it's called the bee balm for a reason. There are multiple varieties of Monarda we'll talk about in a minute. But this is why a bee succeeds. This is a bee covered in pollen, a hyper close version of a bee covered with pollen. We need bees. Bees and moths are really the top producers of pollination that we have. The butterflies are the sexy stars, and the butterflies, the pretty thing that we all catches our eye because they're large and they're colorful. But if you watch a butterfly, it's not doing a lot of pollination. It sort of lands with its long legs and it lands on a plant, dives in, gets whatever nourishment it wants. But the natural pollination is what's happening to this bee. It's covered in pollen and moving around plant to plant indiscriminately, leaving pollen as it moves through other plants. So moths, flies, to a degree, beetles are all the natural pollinators that we have that produce a lot. And interestingly enough, you'd think the pollinators are only out during the day, and a lot of the pollination would happen during the day. But the fact of the matter is, studies have been shown that our moths are among the largest, produce over half of the pollination that goes on is nighttime by moths. There's many more species of moths than there are bees, and they're very active at night doing the work, moving things around, moving pollen around. But here's just a great picture of some purple echinacea showing, the variety of insects on that. We've got bumblebees, we've got the skipper butterfly over here to the far side, this guy over here. We've got grub-loving beneficial wasp back here. I think this is the wasp. So, every plant is attracting a wide variety of insects. So home landscapes, what can we do? Ideally, we would have a Cape Cod lawn. But if you drive around a lot of the homes in a lot of our communities, that maybe is not what you're seeing. We would have a Cape Cod lawn, we'd have a forested edge between our properties, we'd have perennial beds with native plants, maybe a few oaks, a few pines, some cherries. But unfortunately, what we're seeing more and more of is the bright green lawn, or a former lot it's filled with invasive plants. We're seeing insect trucks out, and we're seeing just really unfortunate limited diversity of plant material. And I think the nursery industry here has gotten a lot better. People like you are out asking for it, and we're seeing an increase of availability of native plants. But the landscape industry really promotes certain plants in the way that they sell and what's available. And so we just see a lack of diversity. But we need to think differently. And that's really what this talk and others that have been going on which is think about what a biodiverse yard looks like. How can it be attractive? Get your mind away from the, here's a plant, here's a lot of brown mulch, here's a plant, here's a lot of brown mulch. Think about a different way, that a more natural look in your lawn that has that seasonality that we're talking about. So why do this? Well, we want you to be a part of the solution. You can do it. A homeowner can do it. They can be a part of the solution. You can attract pollinators and support our insects. Insects live on insects. There are wasps that live on caterpillars. There's certainly, we've talked about the birds, but diversify the yard and bring that to your yard. And keep the Cape looking like the Cape. I think, you move here from Jersey or suburban, urban New York, suburban New York, Florida, God forbid, and you try to recreate those gardens here because that's what you like. How about enjoying the Cape for what it is? The Cape's the Cape, and try to keep it looking that way. So if you want to go native, and we're going to cover these in a little more depth, but quickly, what can you do? And this is what I'll talk a little more about, but it's replicate our open space. First and foremost, think about what you like when you take a hike on a trail. What's attractive about that hike and that managed or in that open space in your community or your conservation lands? Have less lawn. A lawn provides zero benefit. A green lawn without weeds is absolutely a monoculture of no assistance. The earthworms may be below there, but aside from earthworms and the voles that live underneath there, it's not providing habitat for insects. So think about how much lawn you have and think about how you're managing it, how often you mow it. Just mowing it every 2 to 3 weeks could be a help instead of every week, because at least you'd have some weed growth and would provide some reason for being. Creating overwinter habitats, we'll talk quickly about. I've already mentioned spring and fall food sources, but we can have a nature-based solution, and that's really what, if you do a little research with Xerces, you'll find out. Create habitat. So this is, making a home for insects. This is a new bed we put in our house. This is the first year of it, and there's a fair amount of space, but I knew how big these plants were going to get. This is now so full you cannot see, only in a few spots from a few angles do you see this brown space. And you notice this is not mulch. This is natural leaf. This is pine needles. This is whatever else is around my yard that blew in there or that I brought over there. And this is, you'll see in a minute, another photo, I think of it, or we'll see it a little later on, how floral and beautiful that can be. Our pollinator pathway brochure that's up here, you can grab when you leave, talks about leaving the leaves. And what that really is about is protecting and creating an overwintering habitat by leaving those leaves in the fall. But I also, if that doesn't convince you to do it, maybe less expensive garden care can convince you to do it. Because the fact of the matter is, for years, I was guilty of it. Every spring for a couple of years, I was bringing in 10, 12 yards of mulch and laying all this mulch and spending all this money for mulch. And when the fact matter is, I had already let the leaves that fell, raked them up out of the beds, hauled them off to the transfer station, when that was the mulch I should have been using and could have been using, and now primarily do use. So it also protects your soil by leaving the leaves, and it adds over time a natural organic beneficials to the lawn. So leaving the leaves is a great way to start. And ideally, there's a lot of talk about, where do I leave them? And the fact of the matter is, yeah, you don't leave them on your driveway and your walkways, and you don't even have to leave them on your lawn, because as I said, the lawn's not going to be helped that much. If you mulch them and use them as compost, that's one thing. So blow them off of that, but leave them and disturb them as little as possible. Put them back up into your beds. Leave them there. And you don't have to surrender to a wilderness look. If you have densely planted gardens, those leaves will ultimately disappear and you won't see them there. There's a concept in this spirit of native and natural gardening of leaving a cue to care. And one of the cues to care are things like this, which is a sign that we have, which is, hopefully we'll start seeing around the Cape, but it's basically a sign saying, this is a pathway. This lawn is here for a purpose. And maybe it's a handmade sign. Maybe it's anything. Maybe it's just a nice clean edge around your property that shows I am maintaining this, but the rest of this is here for a purpose. So that's part of the whole process of leaving leaves and creating habitat. And when you leave it over the winter. How long can you leave it? And this is, I mentioned to you that the bees come up through the ground because they're all ground nester, and certainly there are overwintering bees that live in a dormant state. The queen will live throughout the winter, oftentimes underground, and will need to come out. The males typically don't, but they come out when the weather warms to about 50 degrees or more. So on the Cape, that can be kind of late till we have regular 50-degree days. Our springs are longer. But it's really, as I say, as long as you can tolerate it, because at some point in time, you want to get in this bed, you need to clean up some things. If you had some high tall plants from the previous season, you want to start cutting them down. But you can leave a lot of those seed heads, you can leave those stems in the bed, break them up if they bother you. But I mentioned that on the native plants, a lot of the bees will use those hollow stems to go and reproduce. So you want to leave some stems, appreciating that in time that phlox is going to grow up, that boneset or those other natives are going to grow up through those remaining sticks, stems from the previous year. So I encourage you to leave them. Be a lazy gardener again. But a lot of, I mentioned, there is activity of overwintering, and you want to protect them and not go in with the leaf blower in November and blow it all out and have bare dirt. That is not ultimately going to help anybody, and it costs you a little bit of money to have that done, or time. But here's an example of leaving natural elements, leaving a tree stump, leaving a log. You probably have all heard woodpeckers out in your lawn, but there's a lot of insects that live in these tree stumps. You turn this over and see what's underneath, see what's up behind this little bark edge here. You'll be amazed at what's growing in here. So leave natural elements for everybody to enjoy. And here's the garden I was just talking about. This is that same garden that had a lot of space between the plants. This is high summer. It's even fuller this year. But I would challenge anybody to say that that's not an attractive garden landscape. It's got complementary colors. It has diversity of plant material. There was seasonality there. It can be just as attractive as a more traditional managed lawn. Now, this is what it looks like in the winter. And I encourage you to, leave this up. You see the sticks. We had a lot of snow this year, or some snow for the first time. And, I'll leave it there. But at a certain point in time, I'll start cutting it down starting to prepare for the new plant material to rise up from the earth. Most all of these plants that I have in there will grow all new growth every year. There are a few shrubs in here that, of course, continue to evolve off of prior year wood, but a lot of this is all fresh out of the ground growth every year. So another native plant, another angle. This is Lobelia cardinalis, the red on the left there. Just now coming out. So if you see black-eyed Susans. In the back up here, the white is boneset, eupatorium, sneezeweeds, just getting ready to bloom over here. So it's a nice diversity of plant material. You have a lot of choices when you're planting for natives. And this is our screen porch. This is the front of the porch. And I don't want to fence it. I don't want to protect it. But you notice there's lavender right there. That's not native. There is an Annabelle hydrangea that's native, but it's not particularly pollinator friendly. But this bed is what I call, it's what the bunnies don't eat. So I've learned if you don't fence it, the bunnies find their way to eat it. There are actually bunnies live back along the back of this, right in front of our screen porch. But these are plant materials that the bunnies don't typically eat, and it's largely because of scent. So there's Monarda, there's Anise hyssop, there's mountain mint, there are these Bevan's variety geranium here that have a bit of a scent. So I have found for my bunnies that they won't eat these things. And so I mix in natives right along. You see those are Rebecchias in here, these are yarrow that are in here. So mixing in the natives is a perfectly acceptable way of having a yard. Ideally, you go for about 70% natives in the sort of perfect world of Doug Talamay, who's I give you a reference in the handout I gave you. Doug is from Delaware, our region, effectively. Excellent communicator and supporter of this whole initiative. And he says ideally go for 70%. But this is the front yard of our house. And this is not all native. I have been gradually adding more and more natives. But there are things like this is a heuchera, down here coral bells. This is the variety of a dogwood. This is a variety of an elderberry. Those are native plants in the straight species versions. This is a big river birch. It's under a big oak. There's lots of native trees around us. This is the hydrangea right here, the white flowers of the oak leaf native hydrangea. So it just shows you can blend together an attractive landscape really using these plants. And I mentioned here they are again on the flowers. But what are Cape natives? And in a perfect world, in an ideal world, you would be planting things that grow here. The fact of the matter is a lot of what we find grows largely across New England and the Northeast, maybe even Eastern US. But if you really are obsessing about what's native to the Cape, here are some examples. The Association Preserve Cape Cod has a wonderful list. Their website's on your resources. And it talks about trees and native perennials that are native to New England and likely Cape Cod. You know, there's a lot of plants will survive much broader regions than just the Cape. But their website, I think, assures you these things will grow well here. And my point of showing this is that it's a large variety of plant material. And think about this. If you've got a landscaper working for you and you want to start moving towards this, either do a little research, give them these websites. If they don't know, hopefully they know about native plants. But there's a nice variety of things, particularly the grasses that really provide a lot of interest, take very low water. These plants exist in our forests because they have lived through the climate that we all live in. Bit about invasives, because part of our mantra with the pollinator pathway is remove invasives from your property. And a common question, do non-native plants support pollinators? It's a bit like candy, they all eat them, but I love Fritos, but I don't eat Fritos every day, all the time. We can't survive on McDonald's. So I think of invasives in a similar way. They eat the berries and spread them. So clearly the birds are digesting the berries of the burning bush, but they're doing harm because they're spreading the burning bush throughout our forest. Our non-native plants are always invasive, and non-native plants aren't always invasive. We have a program in the state of Massachusetts that makes the determination of what's invasive or not. largely if it doesn't spread, if it doesn't spread by seed being moved, if it's always coming from a source, they don't consider it invasive in the state of Massachusetts. But we have some terrible ones here on the Cape, and the Japanese honeysuckle is one you can spot in our forest if you take our walks on our conservation trails. Sadly, increasingly, how many of you have seen Japanese knotweed? It's popping up everywhere. I think I don't know how far back it goes. I feel like don't you think it's like last 20, 30 years, it's really taken off, if not even shorter than that. Multiflora rose, people think it looks beautiful, but it is bare in our open space. And here, and certainly in Orleans, bittersweet's the worst of all, because bittersweet will get so thick, the vine's so large, the roots so deep, it is really competing with any native species that would hopefully grow in that area. And it will bring down trees, as will, well, that's probably the worst culprit of bringing down trees, is bittersweet, uncontrolled bittersweet. Most recent thing here, which this was commonly, I think, until you may still be able to buy Scotch broom in the nurseries, but Scotch broom is one of the most recent plants that they've added in Massachusetts to an invasive list because of the way it moves. So there are 36 varieties in Massachusetts that are identified as invasive today. That's another 33 or 34 that are likely invasive. It's a lot of species to worry about and be mindful of. So take care of your natives, of your invasives. So I just skipped through this quickly. I mentioned that the native plant industry is coming along, and people like you are demanding it. Right now, about 25% of the plant material sold is actually native. So we got a long way to go in terms of what's available, but the retailers are getting better. I listed on your shot some of the best plants for pollinators. This is being studied all the time. Mount Cuba in Delaware literally has undergrads and volunteers monitoring plants. They do plant studies, they plant multiple varieties, and they measure how many pollinators are on these plants over periods of time throughout the days, throughout the bloom cycle. And the very high were the anacisip, which is that purple flower I showed some bees on, butterfly milkweeds, the bee balm, that's the purple, the Monarda fistulosa is the purple one, penstemon, which is early season, mountain mint, goldenrod, and then you see the list for high. I listed this on your handout. These are the plants to plant that are going to attract the most pollinators. We do have natives substitutes for some things, and burning bush I mentioned earlier. There's a beautiful native viburnum that has a lot of the similar color, has berries in the fall. Think about replacing that or choosing to plant that. English ivy is another burden in a lot of our lands, but barren strawberries are a good alternative. And the bittersweet I mentioned, Virginia creeper, which is a beautiful vine, gets gorgeous color. It actually has pollinator benefit, and the birds can eat its berries. Once you know what it looks like when it's young, you won't weed it out of your garden, which I did for years, and I'm less likely to do. Quick things about shady gardens. Just because it doesn't have a flower doesn't mean it's not providing habitat. And our ferns are a great example of this. We have wonderful native ferns, cinnamon, ostrich, sensitive royal, Christmas fern. Christmas ferns almost live year round. They largely stay green a long time. And lots of native sedges. You're putting in grasses and mixing in grasses in your property because you want habitat. They will live underneath those fallen fronds of the fern and the grasses that are there. So a lot of good opportunities. But you can also find flowers. These are, I list them in your handout, but goat's beard's there in the middle, foam flower, tiarella on the left. Hickory I mentioned, that's Lacothway, the flower on a Lacothway plant. So you can get some flower power even in your shady perennials. Early season plants that will do a lot of attraction are the Ansonia, which is here on the left. Big shrubby plant, little blue flowers in May. That's the Canadian windflower, which is a low, almost more like a ground cover that blooms very early. Lovely. More unusual, this is the Spigelia, the red. It's Spigelia marylandica. It's actually more of a mid-Atlantic native, but it was all over the nurseries last year. I was glad to see that. And I mentioned the Baptisia, the wild blue indigo, that's a host plant for a number of butterflies. Blooms nice and early in May and is a nice bush, has interesting seed pods later in the year. Easy, except for bunnies. Echinacea, self-seeds, spreads, beautiful, attractive. Butterfly weed, I find, also does spread a bit if it's got open ground. But it is, that orange color also comes in yellow, is just such an eye popper in your yard. And it stays about 18, 24 inches tall. Very big attractor of pollinators. That's the fistulosa, the purple, which is just this over here on the left. Really, just if you monitor that and see the number of pollinators on it, it's amazing. And then this is a little, maybe lacks a little sexiness because this silvery, sagey kind of color of the leaf, but that is the flower on the mountain mint. Bunnies don't like it, and that's what bunnies don't usually eat these. So it's the reason I try to encourage people to think about them for their yard. I think this is a cool plant if you have kids because it's such a funky looking plant. This is another type of Monarda punctata. It's almost like I see it's like a Dr. Seuss plant. You know, it's just this crazy bloom here with the different colors and but again, big pollinator magnet. So think about that for your yard. Late season or mid to late season, clethra is blooming right now. It's a beautiful scent. This is a shrub that does well. And Joe Pye weed, which is just coming into bloom now in many people's yards around the Cape. In the late season, I haven't mentioned this lobelia blue cardinal flower. It's like the red I showed earlier, but this comes much later in the season. This barely is just getting started. Nice tall plant, all those blue flowers, long lasting flowers there. And then our goldenrods, of which there are so many varieties of solidago. I think thought for a long time to have been a terrible weed that nobody wanted in their yard. But once you find clumping varieties of it and you see this is sort of the final plant to support the monarchs before they head out again, you want to give them all the chance they have. So think about that. So I mentioned the pathway, mentioned our sign. I have handouts up here. Would encourage you to think about it. We are in existence. We're not a separate nonprofit. We are a collaborative. We are trying to bring organizations like the Barnstable Water Coalition, Orleans Conservation Trust, Master Gardeners, garden clubs. We have over 50 organizations supporting us and representing that they support the principles of the pathway and are trying to educate their members about why it's important and what it means in terms of their mission. So, for example, in Orleans, we're trying to teach people to treat their home properties like we treat our conservation lands. You know, we don't, we use pesticides in very limited ways when we're trying to get invasives under control. We always plant natives in those gardens. We support the trees, we leave the snags, we leave the leaves. So it's a nice fit for our mission and trying to teach people to treat their home like that. We're trying to get garden clubs to think about how they plant their garden islands and their various places around the community that they do for civic beauty. Think about adding natives in there. So we're here to just sort of educate and inform people. We have a map that you'll, I mentioned really our practices: natives, subtract lawn, chemicals and fertilizers, leave the leaves. We have gardens all around the Cape that are demonstration gardens. Love to add the ones here in Osterville, should be added to the list soon. But as you see, Dennis, Brewster, Falmouth, Harwich, Sandwich, there are places all over the Cape where we try to encourage people to go visit these gardens and see what a native garden can look like. This is our map. I'm proud to say we started this with about 4 gardens listed on the Cape, and now we're up over 400. If you choose to join us, follow our website, send us, register your home address or the address of a garden you manage for a garden club. It's not promoting that people come see it. It's not putting your home on expecting any kind of home display. It's to show your community and your neighbors that you care, that you value this. It's another cue to care. And in the short term, it puts your name on a mailing list for updates about talks and plant sales and inspiring stories that exist. And we, about once a month, we send out an email with a short newsletter. And it's just really to continue to inspire you is what we're hoping happens. So there's hope. Since the 90s, I think this is really coming around. A few home gardeners were talking about these issues back then. Now I think it's more and more in the trade and in the magazines and in the garden articles. You'll see people talking about it. On the Cape in particular, Orleans has passed a native plant requirement that its town DPW can only plant native plants in town properties. It's a regulation now. It had been a non-binding resolution before, but our select board made it a regulation. Towns are voting to ban fertilizers and pesticides. Orleans has done it. I think Wellfleet did it. Other towns are considering it. We have a wealth of information on your handout. There are a number of resources you can go and educate yourself. And you cared enough to come today, which I think is great. You're here. You had some interest in it, and I hope you'll talk to your friends and neighbors and family and others. So these are the examples. Most of these resources are on the resource list I gave you, but it is not hard to put in plant a pollinator garden or I'm interested in natives, and you'll hear and you'll see in front of you a lot of options. In Massachusetts, we're lucky. We have the Native Plant Trust in Framingham and out west, where there's a garden center that you can buy plants from, as well as in Framingham. We have Grow Native Massachusetts, which is an excellent educator and provider of lectures and information. Maine has the Wild Seed Project, which is all about collecting native, culturally derived seeds from Maine that are naturally derived seeds that they're replanting and growing and selling, trying to sustain our local plant material in our neighboring areas. Lots of great books. I mentioned Xerces earlier, and of course our website, which is on your handout. So I thank you. It's been a long talk. There was a lot of slides, a lot of chatting. I'm happy to take questions, reactions, feedback. Let me know what you think and what are your thoughts about doing this. Yeah.
Well, it's a great thought, but what if you are such a lazy gardener like me, that I don't even know what I have? Is there some research source where someone could look at what you have, or you could send pictures to them and they could tell you?
So a couple things I would say. First off, you have to have a degree of curiosity and interest, I think, if you're going to make this work. There are great, even using your phone nowadays, you can do a Google picture and it'll tell you what a plant is. You can buy an app that'll tell you what a plant is. I would, if you had pictures of the plants on your phone and you could send them to our Master Gardener Hort Clinic, which is through the Barnstable County Extension, which is on your resource page, send them to us. We'll tell you what they are. Talk to your friends and neighbors. I go to garden centers, take pictures of plants. I don't know what it is. You can go to a garden center, see if they have it, or show a garden center employee. But most importantly, do you like the plant? Because if you like it, then you think this is pretty, but I kind of want to know, is it helping pollinators or not? You can make a decision. I'm not saying you have to get rid of non-natives, but maybe you think about what you're adding around that, and then you're smarter about what you add. So ask yourself, do I like that plant? Not just it's there and it exists. So that's another way to approach it. But I think the community around here, the nurseries we have around here are typically very helpful. And ideally you want to buy something, they want you to buy something else, but you're going to get started. It's a great way to get started. Other thoughts or questions or reactions? Jack? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was excellent talk. I learned a lot from you. What do you think about the local nurseries and just your impressions if they're starting to provide more native plants, and are they doing it because there's a growing demand for it, or are they trying to get ahead of the trend, or
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for 4 years, we've been talking to many of the nurseries, and several. Hyannis Country Garden got on it right away. CL Fernari, of course, was strongly behind that. With her help, she and I and the business district in Hyannis replanted all the planters in downtown Hyannis with native plants as a way to get attention. So I think Hyannis has come around, and what I've seen in Hyannis Country Garden is every year there's more, and they've dedicated sections. It used to be just sort of spread among things, and I think now it helps the shopper to see clusters, and whether it's shrubs or perennials. So there are a number of those examples. I don't want to just pick on Hyannis, but they've done it. So Soares down in Falmouth has done tremendous and a long time been a supporter. The Soares nursery has been a long time supporter. Up by us, it's the same way. The farm and other places, they grow a lot of things themselves. So to answer your question, I think it's gotten better every year. I think the consumer is asking them, and the consumer's coming in. So they're better about signage. We offered 4 years ago, could we come in and help you sign plants? Could we use our logo? Could we do something to attract people to your plants? frankly, not surprisingly, they didn't really want us trying to do that, but it got them to realize, I think, the managers of Agway up by us, 3 stores, Cape Coastal in, I think they're in Harwich. The consumers have demanded it. But I would say the problem with that the natives face is we all like to garden in March and April and May, and that's when we're excited about it. Into June, we're excited, the weather's warm and we're out doing it. As you know, the natives don't look like much in that time. So when you go to the nursery, what's sexy is the stuff that's been grown in a greenhouse somewhere and is flowering, and you're like, oh, that is so pretty. I really like that. It may not flower next year in your yard for another month, but it's flowering now because it was forced to be there where it is. So we've got to get people to appreciate that a lot of times what you're shopping for is going to look good in a couple of months, or shop now. I really encourage a lot of people to go to the nurseries now. It's tough to plant now, but shop now, shop in September. Stuff goes on sale. You have to be a little discerning about what you're buying, but it's a bargain time to buy plants because by that time they're tired of watering everything, and you can get things, plants at a discount a lot of times. So I'm a big fall shopper and a big fall planter. That's really the best time to get stuff in the ground. So I'm encouraged. I think it's gotten a lot better. But yeah.
There's a native plant consortium that they're trying to, maybe through
APCC is working diligently. Erin, I think her name is, and Kristen are working. APCC has a great sale every year of straight species natives. They have varied how they've done it, but they are a great source of that. And so this next step is trying to, I think they're finding their way of, are there growers out there locally on the Cape who will grow more for resale? Are there, can they become a wholesaler? Can they link up wholesalers to retailers? So I think they're trying to find out what that is, but they had a very successful plant sale this year, got a lot of material from them that's done very well. They were a founding member along with others of the Pollinator Pathway 5 years ago almost now. So, and they've been a tremendous help. So yeah, I'm excited that will go somewhere. Kristen, I think, has big ideas, and they got a grant, dedicated a staff person to do it. And I think they're really hoping local farmers growers will see the value in growing natives. So we're hopeful. Yeah.
Our Rose of Sharon tree, is that a native?
It is not, but it's beautiful. It is in bloom right now, as we all know. I have one. I didn't take it out. Bees do come to it. So it's not sterile. But no, they're not. But they also aren't shown to be I don't think they're invasive. Have you seen any proof that they're invasive? So I think that's fine. Have it. It's gorgeous. And this time of the year, sometimes you need a shrub that blooms. And that's how you think about your garden is you want interest throughout the season for those pollinators, but also for yourself. You want to look out in your yard and enjoy what you see. So have it. But yeah, unfortunately not.
Right. I noticed over the years, there's less and less bees coming to it used to be you could barely stay outside because there were so many bees, 4 of them. And now it's just less every year. I noticed.
Yeah, I mean, it's habitat. It's also spraying, quite frankly. I don't know where you live, but I mean, it could be you've got a neighbor who's spraying or somebody else not too far away is spraying. I mean, bees travel hundreds of feet. So, maybe 1,000 feet. The biggest bees, maybe a tenth or a quarter of a mile. But, so they're living locally. So if somebody around you is spraying, it could be having impact on what you're seeing in your yard. Which is why we are trying to get people to think twice about what they're doing and think about the value. I always advocate people, you got to take care of yourself. And so that means spraying yourself. They're not afraid of bees. They don't want to kill bees. I know nobody wants to kill the bee, but the fact of the matter is trying to go after the mosquitoes and with no scientific support, thinking they're going after ticks, they're spraying. And that's really, it's harmful to all insects that are out and about at that time, which is many. Yeah, hi.
3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I volunteered to create a garden at the Barnstable Senior Center, they had this patch of dirt
Yeah,
right by their front
yeah,
door. I know very little about gardening. It's mostly shade. I'm starting all this because I'm looking for help.
okay,
It's mostly shade, so that has its own.
yeah,
issues.
challenges.
And last fall, I went off Cape to the Monarch Gardener in
Mhm.
Topsfield.
Yep.
And bought, I don't know, maybe 12 natives
Hmm.
and planted them last fall. And quite a few of them have come up, but they're like just one or two stalks.
Yeah, they can be a little slow. You
Yeah.
bought small ones, about plug or a
Yeah,
little bigger than a
right.
plug, yeah.
Because I'm paying for the.
Yeah, nice of you to do. Yeah,
But I wondered if you could direct me to someone, either in the Master Gardeners or that who come and look at the place and say, well, you're going in the wrong direction here. Did you consider this? Or, because I have very little knowledge, I just
Right.
have interest.
right.
And,
I would encourage you to get some interest in the senior center and find an advocate or two. Go to their board. Do they know what you're doing? Are you talking to the board and getting some support? But APCC does offer a consulting service, and it may be filled for this year, but you could get a hold of them and find out if they would help you next year. They will come out and talk to you about it. You could reach out through the Master Gardener info website and see if they have gardeners. We are a volunteer organization, so it's really about what somebody's particular interest is. But maybe they live in the area, they live near the place, they didn't know you wanted to do it. We don't have any problem sending out notices that somebody's looking for help. We get sort of credit hours for supporting projects, and we don't get hours for supporting weeding and planting. We get hours for speaking and working with children, and there's other activities we get credit for. But it doesn't mean that somebody doesn't care in the area or maybe is a member.
yeah.
So I encourage you to, maybe do a little article and see if you can stimulate some interest. But talk to APCC, reach out to them, go on their website, and you'll see information about this consulting service. It's free. They use. Oh, did you do it? Is it free or not? Oh, no.
But you get 4 total man hours that come out. And then you actually write a
Oh, I didn't realize they paid that much for it.
350.
Okay, well, that's a lot then. That's not going to help you. Because there are ecological landscapers too.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny because I'm out there, doing this, everyone comes by, oh, it's beautiful, thank you, oh, da, da, da. I've never heard, and they've mentioned it in their newsletter.
Okay.
Because there's also a woman who does a beautiful, huge vegetable garden
yeah,
in the other side. But it's like, I've never, if someone from the board has even come by and said anything, I don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
I know the directors. And,
yeah.
they're all encouraged
Yeah.
and stuff, but.
There's a lot of demand for gardens around the Cape and people wanting to do it. So I can imagine there's a bit of exhaustion over, I'm doing my own yard and now trying to do with this. I feel for it. We have a library I've tried to get support for. If there's it's possible. Send an inquiry to the Master Gardeners and we'll see,
Okay.
because if there's, some connection to the community support, it's possible somebody will have it, I have no problem putting it in our newsletter, trying to get somebody's interested in and pitch your story. So give it a try.
Okay, great.
We want to help. Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't realize it was that much. I thought it was either a donation or something less, but it is an excellent source. I hope you like what they did for you, because it is the plan you get tailored to your lawn, tailored to your ground is really, really helpful. There's lots of plans online. Some of the resources I gave you will tell you how to plant a shady native plant garden. Will tell you how to Grow Native in Massachusetts has, sort of standard plans for different landscape environments, and you can get ideas through that, and that's of course free. Yeah, good luck.
I
I support you.
Be a little more basic than that and just like, is this dirt any good?
Okay, well, yeah,
I work compost
Well,
into it and.
good.
and
You're doing
stuff,
the right
but I
thing.
mean, like, am I working against myself, I guess?
I doubt you are the natives, because frankly, the natives are happy in poorer soil than many plants, but you have to, again, doing some research on what natives will do best in whatever the soil conditions are that you have. And the APCC site is good for that, where you go through and list their plants. They will tell you soil condition, ideal to soil conditions and light conditions. So it might help you narrow down what you're buying if you're going to invest in some new things. And you know, if you have a nursery that for whatever reason is close to the center, I find into the season, some of the, if you had a letter from your board and said, we're trying to plant a native plant garden, would you donate some natives at the end of the season? They're very generous. Capabilities over on 6A and Dennis, as an example, I know does that. And I would hope somebody else might help
Well, I
you in
think
that regard.
Country Garden does for, more organized or formal planting
Yeah.
around the property. This is
Okay.
just kinda, I picked
Your
it up
idea.
And they said, go.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. I am happy. We have our signs for sale for $15. I have the signs up here. If you wish to get on our county extension mailing list, you can sign up there. We don't sell your name for any other reason, but to send you newsletter updates about what's going on with their county extension office. And the Master Gardeners, we have plant sales, we have garden education programs in the spring and the fall that are open to the public. People like me give talks all around the Cape. But we have a spring symposium, fall symposium, backyard hort program. So there's a lot of education available. And if you want to become a Master Gardener, applications just went online and they're available. So add your name and your email if you want to add up to that, if you want to sign on to that.